between Dr. Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. And they were debating what was the world's oldest profession. And Benjamin Rush, who obviously was a doctor, said, well, the world's oldest profession was the physician, because it was Eve was cut out of Adam's rib, and so you needed a physician to be able to do that. Thomas Jefferson, who I think you know, designed Monticello and the University of Virginia, said no. The world's oldest profession is the architect, because it was the architect that brought order out of all the chaos throughout the universe. And Dr. Ben Franklin said, no, that's not right. The world's oldest profession is the politician. Who do you think created that chaos in the first place? And as I think, and so, I think to myself, I'm the governor of Florida. I've got this great cheat code. All I have to do is look at New York, California, Illinois, and do the opposite of what they're doing. And it works out pretty well. Now, I will say this, because I know we've got a lot of folks from the Ivy League here. I ran for Congress. Oh, man, that was 14 years ago now. And, I'm running in like a 7-way Republican primary, pretty conservative district. And I'm doing that. I was had served in the Iraq War. I was a former naval officer. I was young. My wife is pretty. All this other stuff. But I had degrees from Yale and Harvard Law School. Now, in a Republican primary, that's the closest thing you're going to get to a scarlet letter. And so I had to explain to all these conservative voters that I was one of them. And I didn't brag on anything about myself, except the one thing I would always brag is I said, listen, guys, I'm one of the few people in this country who went through both Harvard and Yale and came out more conservative than when he went in. And that's true, and that served me well, having gone through that cooker and learning all about the way the liberals and the far left think. So I end up becoming governor. So Florida, 2018, I win, narrow election, just like every election had been in Florida for really a generation. And when I was getting ready to take office, people advised me, hey, Florida is a very delicate political balance. You better tread lightly. You don't want to get over your skis. You could induce a negative reaction and a snapback. Maybe you don't get reelected or whatever. And I understood that advice, but it was advice that I rejected. My view was, I was elected with 100% of the executive power, and I intended to use it. And I would govern under a banner of bold colors, not pale pastels. To me, conservative philosophy that would guide me in this was very simple. I mean, this is a recognition that you have certain enduring truths about human nature, about the source of our rights being from God, not from government, about the need to limit government in its proper sphere, and on down the line. Those truths do not change. They were as true in 1776 and 1787 as they were in 2018 when I got elected, and as they are in 2026. The window dressing changes, the environment we operate in changes, but you're still applying that basic worldview to the issues that you have to tackle. So we were very bold, we were very aggressive, and I think what we can show is you look at how other states have gone over this period of time. You see California. I mean, you see their governor frolicking around Davos, doing all this stuff. You see what's happening in New York. You see Minnesota. It's interesting. I've known about Waltz for a long time because I got his refugees from Minnesota. They're in Naples and Sarasota because they're fleeing his governance for many, many years. And so you see, what states doing conservative philosophy have done. So Florida shows that conservatism, when applied properly, when applied aggressively, boldly, and proudly, works. And so here's some of the tail of the tape. Florida has the #1 economy in the United States among all 50 states 3 years in a row. We ranked #1 in public higher education 10 straight years. We're ranked #1 in education freedom every year that I've been governor. #1 in new business formations 5 years in a row. #1 in net in-migration since I became governor. #1 in tourism, which probably isn't much of a surprise. We have a 50-year low in the crime rate. Our GDP, our economy in Florida, when I took office, was a little over $1 trillion. It's now $1.85 trillion. That's a 70+% increase in 7 years. If you look at Florida's budget, we have the lowest per capita spending of any state in the United States. We have the smallest number of state bureaucrats per capita of any state in the United States. We have, of course, no income tax. We're working on getting rid of property tax at the local level for our full-time residents, and hopefully we'll be able to get that done. But if you look at our debt, 180 years of Florida history. Just since I've been governor, we've retired more than 50% of that. We now have the lowest per capita debt of any state in the United States. And on it goes. I can give you the tail of the tape. I can talk about all those things. And it's important. And it is a success story in and of itself. But, you know, I think we have situations throughout our country where you have these Republicans, they'll get in, and if they cut taxes, maybe attract some businesses, they think, oh, you know, we've won. Let me tell you, that's necessary, but it is far from sufficient to actually doing what you need to do to defend the livelihoods and the aspirations of your people. Yes, I have to be a good steward of tax dollars. I have to be a good steward of the economy. I have to make sure we have public order, respond to natural disasters, all those things. But I also, as a conservative, have a responsibility to protect the people I represent from the pathologies of the political left. Because when those pathologies are left to run amok, they destroy institutions. They destroy cities and counties and states. And so what we've done, you know, we pride ourselves on being the free state of Florida. And yes, no income tax. Yeah, you could go do what you want during COVID. Yes, all those things. But the reason why I think we deserve that moniker is no state has come even close to doing what we've done to recapture core institutions of society from the political left. It used to be Republicans would just cede that. The left controls the schools, the left controls the universities, the left, even corporate America for a time, all these different things. Oh, we don't really want to fight some of that. You know, it's fighting the culture, all this stuff. Oh, you just can't do that. No, you have to do it. And we've done that time and time again. So just take a look at education. You want to talk about the influence of school unions? Look at California. You know, when I was growing up, probably from World War II through like the 1980s and 90s, California was one of the top 5 states for education K-12 every year. Now they're 5 from the bottom. Why? Well, there's a couple reasons maybe, but the one major, the teachers union. It is run by and for the teacher union, and they're pursuing a political agenda, and they're trying to serve themselves at the expense of students and families. So we recognize that we had to liberate parents from that paradigm, and so we were the first state in America to do universal school choice for every single parent in the state of Florida. The money follows the student, and you can make the decisions how you see fit. So you can go to private school with a scholarship, you can go to charter school, your school districts likely have massive amounts of choice, and you can make those decisions. And it's interesting, just take our charter schools. We have 400,000 kids in charter school K-12. That's more than a lot of states have in their entire K-12 system. Our charter students are disproportionately low income, disproportionately Black and Hispanic, and yet, if that was its own state, they would rank in the top 5, our charter population, in student achievement. And so what we're doing works, and you see the results. We've also made sure, so how do we make sure that schools are educating, not indoctrinating? Is it okay to have a kindergartner being taught that they were born in the wrong body and that gender is just a choice? Not in Florida, it's not. And so we were the first state to enact a Parents' Bill of Rights that says parents have the responsibility and the right to direct the education and upbringing of their kids, including being able to access the curriculum and ensuring that things are appropriate for their kids. And we also did school unions, no automatic deduction of union dues. So now teachers, they have to write a check if they want to join. Well, guess what? Many of them aren't joining anymore, and these school unions are withering on the vine. And so no one's done more to recapture K-12 education than we have in Florida. Higher education. We were the first state to eliminate DEI from our public university system. But we've also made reforms that will help reinforce our desired change in culture. So my first year as governor, we were like, okay, we're going to set up conservative institutes. Now, we didn't necessarily call it that, but that's what it was, right? We want places in the university where they're actually going to be able to talk about conservative things and the great books and whatever. And we had Robbie George come down. He came to the Florida Governor's Mansion. We did a thing. Florida State has this institute, whatever. The problem was the professors that populated it were just drawn from the existing faculty. So it's like rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. It didn't change the culture in any way. So we said, all right, we got to think a little bit better on this. So we did two things. One, we're the only state in the country in our university system, all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be terminated for poor performance. So what you've seen, these activist professors that are unproductive, that have political agenda, aren't doing the research, aren't teaching, they're being shown the door. And, you know, the media will write articles, oh, professors are leaving the state of Florida. Ooh, and I'm just thinking to myself, you know, if Marxist professors are leaving our state, that is good for Florida. That is not bad for Florida. And so we've been able to do that. But just as important, we have changed hiring because, you know, the professors think, the faculty think that they should govern the university, that it's shared governance, them and then the people that are actually have authority to do it. We reject that. Your job is to perform a function. And so we now have great professors can be recruited and they can be provided tenure and ratified by the Board of Trustees without the faculty being able to veto that. So if you're conservative and you're eminent, you don't have to worry about being blackballed by those professors anymore. So what's happened? Place like University of Florida or Hamilton School, we've brought people in from Princeton. We just brought in a professor from Harvard, 40 years he had been there. He said he wanted to find sanity away from the woke nonsense that you see up there. We brought people from Oxford, Stanford, all these places. And if we didn't have these rules in place that empowered that to happen, you couldn't have done that in 50 years, what we've done in the last 3 years. So we have done more on higher education. Oh, by the way, some of you guys I know probably pay a lot for your school. We have the lowest in-state tuition in America as well, $6,300 a year. I don't think anybody can beat that. So we don't cede higher ed to the left. We also understood what the left is trying to do with illegal immigration and with election fraud. So no state has done more than the state of Florida to both reduce the carrots to come illegally, including things like, you know, we eliminated in-state tuition for illegal aliens, which had been done before my tenure. We said no driver's licenses or ID cards and took away incentives to come. So now, you know, these people, when Biden was in, they'd come across the border. They're like, oh, no, we don't want to go to Florida anymore because, you know, you don't think. We also are the only state where all 67 sheriffs, all of our police departments, and all of our state agencies are working with DHS to conduct interior enforcement, enforce the law. And the thing is, you see what's happening in Minnesota, all these places, it's chaos. Well, the politicians are fighting, you're bringing in, you're inciting. For us, we're all working together, and so you don't see the same thing in the state of Florida. And first of all, that's the right thing to do. You got to have rule of law. You can't have massive numbers of people pouring in illegally. All those things are important. But why does the left, why do they want open borders so bad? Because, you know, you go back, you know, there were very liberal icons who hated open borders. I mean, Cesar Chavez hated having people come in illegally across the border in Mexico. Bill Clinton signed very strong anti-illegal immigration things. And it used to be that the Democrats cared more about stopping illegal. Republicans, you know, 30, 40 years ago, they wanted the cheap labor for corporate America. And so in some respects, the old Democratic Party was even stronger than Republican. Now, every single person in 2020 in that primary, do you believe they should all come get free benefits? They all said yes, right? Why? It's because they want them to be able to vote and they want to be able to expand liberal political power. And so that is with illegal immigration, but then if you're able to get signed up to vote and do all that. So we recognize the connection between that and election integrity. So we did the strongest statutory reforms in the country. ban Zuckerbucks, ban ballot harvesting, obviously ID to vote, and all that stuff, which is very important. But we also understood on an institutional level, part of the issue, a lot of states have laws against voter fraud. But just think about it. If you're in San Francisco and someone commits voter fraud, is that prosecutor there going to want to prosecute voter fraud? Of course not. And so we had situations in Florida where the jurisdictions most likely to have voter fraud would have prosecutors who were just more liberal and didn't necessarily want to do it. So we created a state election crimes unit. And so if an illegal votes, if someone votes in 2 states, all the different things that can happen, we now have jurisdiction at the state level to go in, bring the cases, and hold them accountable. And guess what? You've seen a huge, huge difference as a result of that. So we've restored our elections. We're promoting the rule of law with respect to immigration. And then, of course, the rule of law writ large. What the left has done by letting these criminals running free across these cities has destroyed cities all across the country. I mean, I'll never forget a couple years ago, I'm walking the streets of San Francisco, and like 2 minutes in, I see a guy defecating on the sidewalk. I see people using drugs openly, everything like that. I'd see some San Franciscans. It's interesting. 3 years into COVID, most of them are still wearing masks outside. That's not a coronavirus. That's a mind virus problem when you're doing that. And so they're doing, and some of them, had some colorful language about me when they recognized me, as you would expect in San Francisco. But the cops coming over thanking me because they appreciate someone standing up, for the rule of law. So in Florida, we have the lowest crime rate we've had in 50 years. You can steal what you want in California and some of these places. We did the strongest package to combat retail theft of anywhere in the United States. And so it got to the point where you had an illegal alien larceny gang. They would steal in New York City, but they would take the proceeds and they would come to Florida and then they would do things. And so they were interviewed by CNN. They said, well, why don't you just steal in Florida if you like spending in Florida so much? They said, because they put you in jail when you steal in Florida. That's why we don't steal in Florida. So this works. We also, I'm the only governor in America that has removed Soros-funded prosecutors from office. And that, of all the things that have happened in urban America, the election of these guys with Soros's money to not apply laws and to let people run amok has been one of the most destructive things. And you see these Democrat politicians, I don't know if it's like a humiliation ritual. They will all take a picture with Alex Soros, and then Soros he'll tweet it out like, oh, have a new whoever, and they all do it because they're all owned by Soros. That's why they do it, and we've seen the result has been very, very destructive throughout our country. And I know some people are also sensitive about leftism overtaking corporate America. I think we're the only state that's really leaned in against that. When you started to see the ESG craze, you did see DEI in corporate America, rank discrimination being done, particularly against white males. We stood in and with our pension fund, basically said we took $2 billion from BlackRock, who was leading the charge on that. We said we're not doing DEI. We're going to take our money and we're going to go elsewhere. And I think it's important that conservatives and particularly elected Republicans are willing to do this because, it's like, okay, we're conservative, we want less government, and I think you can do that in a way that's energetic, that reinforces our values, that stands for the common good, but it could also just evolve into kind of like a watery corporatism. You see that in the Congress, quite frankly. I mean, that's what it is. I don't think that's good government. I don't think that's electorally appealing either. So you don't want to do that. And so we had to have a little standoff in Florida over, what's the proper role for corporations in our state. And it was a company that nobody's ever heard of that's in Orlando named Disney. And basically, Disney injected itself into our education policy. They wanted to sue to overturn our Parents' Bill of Rights. And this was about gender ideology in elementary school. First of all, a kids company should not be taking that position. That was stupid for them to do it, but they were doing it. And, on the one hand, they have a right. I'm not sure that's consistent with the fiduciary duty of their shareholders, so I think it hurt their business a lot. But they had enjoyed, since the 1960s, control of the local government where Disney was. No one's ever seen anything like that. They got massive breaks, subsidies. They could actually tax the other businesses and use it for Disney products or whatever. So I'm just like, well, wait a minute. Okay, you're waging war against our policy, and then you're taking effectively subsidies you had from Florida in order to do it. I'm pulling the plug on that. So we eliminated their control over this local government and restored, I put a state control board in place, because honestly, like, you can't just be a punching bag for some of these big companies. But it's interesting, when we did that, you know, a lot of people didn't even really understand. The media kind of mischaracterized it, but people are like, oh, there he goes again, the governor. Disney's now, they're going to leave. They're going to take Space Mountain to Columbus, Ohio, or this. Yeah, right. I mean, give me a break. So not only did they not do that, but they're now investing $18 billion into expansion of their parks. And so, you know, we did the right thing. No one had ever had any confrontation with them in the history of Florida politics and lived to tell the story. We did. And if we hadn't have done that with Disney those years ago, I don't think we would have arrested the spread of wokeism in corporate America the way it has been arrested. I don't think there's still work to do. But at that time, no one, as a corporate executive, feared any blowback from the right. All they were worried about was placating the woke mob. I even told the CEO of Disney at the time, I said, you know, if you stay quiet on this, they're going to hate you for 48 hours, then they're going to find another outrage, right? But if you bend the knee, they know they got you. They're going to come back, and they're going to come back, and they're going to come back. So I think it was really important, not just for Florida, but also writ large throughout the country. We also were able to recapture the Supreme Court in Florida. We had one of the most liberal Supreme Courts in the history in the country. Bush versus Gore, all these different things they would do. 7-member court, 4 liberal, 3 conservative. When I came in, we now have, of the 7 members, 6 of them are appointed by me, all conservative, and it's probably the most conservative state Supreme Court in the entire country. We also had to recognize threats from the left in our Constitution. Now, I don't know in all the states you're from, I know California has this. You know, we have these ballot initiatives. And, you know, in a big state like Florida, it's hard to do messages, so it really benefits people that have resources and that are able to spend tens of millions of dollars drilling the message in. So in 2024, we had 2 very well-funded initiatives being done by more liberal interests. One was abortion till birth. The other was basically a constitutional right to smoke marijuana wherever you wanted. Now, those were both really bad policies, certainly shouldn't be in the Constitution. But, you know, they spent $285 million between the 2 of them trying to pass it. And so, you know, I was in a situation where I can get all these policies right with the legislature and appointments and all these other things, and yet, if we become California through the back door, then what good is this to be doing this? And so we recognize that's a big threat to the Constitution. You shouldn't be putting this in there. And we're going to fight it. And so an abortion, so we did a heartbeat bill a couple years ago, and, you know, which was really revolutionary for Florida because, you know, we had not been terribly conservative on that. And people said, well, it's not that popular, it's this, it's that. And it's like, at some point, are you going to do what's right? Or are you just going to put your finger in the wind? So I would much rather do what's right and let the chips fall where they may than do things that I clearly don't believe are right just because I'm trying to gain some short-term political advantage. So we did that, but the reality is once we did that, they then came with this really extreme amendment, not only abortion till birth, but you wouldn't even have to have a physician perform the abortions, which is really, really horrifying. So we dug in, we fought the fight with the public, and we won that and really preserved, I think, Florida's Constitution. And then the final thing that we did was really fight a politically captured medical establishment during the COVID-19 pandemic. And, you know, the frustrating thing was I had never even dealt with it. No one, I ran for governor, no one asked me about a pandemic. No one was thinking about a pandemic. I didn't know anything about it. But then we get into this, and they're telling us to do all these things. And then I'm getting data in, and the data wasn't doing what they were saying it was going to do. And then they would say that, you know, putting a mask on will work. And then I looked at all the studies that said, no, it's not going to stop it. And then they would say, do this, close schools, do this. I'm like, wait a minute. So what happened was follow the science was really follow the political science. They had a narrative that they were pushing. You did not dare broach that, or man, they would bring down a ton of bricks on you. And it's interesting because there were a lot of physicians in Florida who would tell me privately that I was right. No one was willing to say that publicly in those first 3 or 4 months into COVID because they knew that they would face a lot of repercussions. So from the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Medical Association, all these things, all these institutions that were pushing this stuff had really been corrupted by the narrative and by the ideology. And so we stood in that breach. We took all the hits. In fact, I think, and I've run for offices, I've taken all these actions, I've done all this other stuff. You take blowback when you do that. That's just the reality. Leadership is not cost-free. You are going to get blowback. If you add up all the blowback I've gotten for everything I've done, in all campaigns, all that, and then compare it to the blowback I got in the first 4 or 5 months of COVID, the COVID was bigger than everything else combined. I mean, this was an international frenzy, and this is really the left trying to assume more and more control. And had Florida not stood up, I don't know how things would have worked out. I know when Biden got in, they wanted to do these vaccine passports. So you would literally have to show proof of MNRA vaccination to go to restaurants, to go to all these other things. So I saw that brewing, so I got the legislature to ban that. You have a right to make decisions for yourself, and you shouldn't be circumscribed based on whether you got an MNRA shot, especially considering a lot of people had COVID. But they were thinking about doing it federally. And basically some of Biden's advisors were like, well, if you do this, Governor DeSantis is going to fillet you. And it's true. We would have done it. And so having us there to push back, really, and now what you see, Jay Bhattacharya, all the things that are happening, you are starting to see on a national level those institutions be reformed in ways that can finally serve the public interest. And so the free state of Florida would not be the free state of Florida without these very dogged efforts to defang the political left and protect our citizens from its excesses. And that, I think, is really, really important. So that's the right thing to do. The question is, do people recognize that? Is that something that's a winning political strategy? Because my view on all this is do what's right, don't worry about, and then just let the chips fall. But, I mean, if the chips fall negatively, you're not going to see very many elected officials want to follow that path. So here's where we are in Florida. When I got elected the first time, 2018, the state had 300,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans, and we had never had more registered Republicans than Democrats in the history of the state. Today, we have 1.4 million more registered Republicans than Democrats. Nobody has ever had a shift that dramatic in American history. So what I would say to you from the vantage point of having gone through all this and been in these fights and been in the fires, some of the keys I think that are necessary for successful conservative leadership. I mean, the first thing is just north is north. You got to know where you're going. And you got to realize that on a day-to-day basis, 90% of the clutter out there has no bearing on whether you're going to ultimately reach that destination. So don't let it divert you. My whole time as governor, I have not taken a single poll about anything that I've done issue-wise. When I was running, no, it's important. Now, that's not a lot of advice you would get from political people. Obviously, they make money when you poll because you have to pay them a lot. That's part of the reason I don't like polling, but that's not the main reason. The reason is just simple. A poll is not going to change the fact that north is north. A poll is not going to change the fact that I have certain beliefs and commitments that I bring to leadership. And so I can't change, who I am. Like Popeye said, I am what I am. And so it doesn't matter. And a leader is not reacting to a poll. A leader sets the course, sets out to do what he says, delivers results, and then guess what? If you do that successfully, people will come on board with you. So maybe you weren't with me to start, but then as we land the plane, you are. That was certainly true with COVID. It was very unpopular what I was doing. They said I was going to kill the kids, all the stuff, having school. And then by the end, no one wanted to admit that they were opposite me. So you got to do north is north. The other thing is in any organization you're in, understand the pressure points, understand the authority you have to actually bring about this stuff. So when I got elected governor, I asked the transition team, I want a list of all the governor's constitutional powers, statutory powers, customary powers. I want to know what the legislature I need for. I want to know what they can block me on, all this stuff. And the reason is because you got to have a thought about how are you going to bring this stuff to fruition. So there's certain things I know as soon as I put my John Hancock on a piece of legislation, they're going to sue. I mean, I get out of bed in the morning, they sue me. I mean, like it's incessant. It's lawfare, but it is what it is. And so you go, okay, this liberal judge he's going to rule against us. I know, but I know the next one we're going to be able to win there or here. Or what about the legislature? Can they stop me? Maybe they have the authority to stop me, but politically what I'm doing, they won't go against me because they know they'll lose their primary. So you got to think about all those things, but you have to understand what tools you have at your disposal. You need to know how to use leverage. It's certainly true in government, but I think it's true in almost any organization that you would be in. The other thing is building a team around you, putting people in positions. What are you looking for? And I'll sometimes have people come in and they'll interview for something, and they'll be like saying like, oh, well, I'll be loyal to you, and all this stuff. And like, I'm not. Look, I'd rather have that than someone say I'm going to be disloyal to you. But that's not really what I look for. To me, that personal loyalty can be fleeting, right? I could be best friends with you one day, and then something happens and I'm not. So what I look for is loyalty and commitment to the broader mission and the cause. And if they have a pre-existing commitment to that, if they have the same fundamental values that I do, then I don't really have to do much guesswork about what they're going to do, because their response to different issues that they have to deal with subordinate to me is going to probably be similar to the response that I would have. And so when they're already committed to the cause, you put them in there and they're going to get the job done. And that's been very successful for us. The other thing that I do, and I really believe in, and this is not just limited to government, you will have capital. You'll have political capital in government. You could have capital doing other things. My view is spend it. You only live once. You have a very limited amount of time, that you can be in office. I'm reminded of the Churchill towards the end of his career. He was giving a speech in this ballroom with the Women's Temperance Society. And the leader of that came up to him and said, Sir Winston, we very much admire your statesmanship, but we object very strongly to your drinking habits. If you added up all the brandy and wine and whiskey that you've drank in your life, it would go up 3/4 of this ballroom. So Churchill looked up, saw what would be above that and said, well, how much to do and so little time to do it. And that's kind of my view of like, you only have a fixed term in office. You only have a limited amount of time. So when I got in the office the first day, I looked around. There was nothing on the walls yet. It's just an empty desk and me. And I was like, you know what? I don't know what SOB is going to succeed me in this position, but they ain't going to have very much to do because I'm going to get all the meat off the bone that I can. If you don't use the capital, it just goes to waste. And then the final thing is certainly in politics, but I think if you're doing other things, the way to really motivate people and animate people is to draw a sharp contrast with the alternative. You'll hear a lot of people in politics in particular, they'll basically be like, oh, well, be a little tepid, you got to be a little squishy here or there. I think the sharper the contrast, the better. And so in Florida, and I think we have examples in federal elections over my lifetime too, but in Florida, I've been the most conservative governor philosophically, ideologically, and in terms of the policies, and yet I won the biggest victory that any Republican has ever won. In fact, we were a swing state when I started. A lot of people thought we were going to be a blue state, and now in the 2024 election, Florida was the #1 swing state for my lifetime. The 2024 election, presidential election, not a single dollar was spent in Florida on that presidential race. Who would have thought that, right? But I think it's because we really defined everything for people and did that. So the final thing I'll say, going back to where we started with America 250, it gives a lot of people time to reflect on what our country was founded on, and there's obviously great principles. There's things that they developed in terms of the science of politics, but ultimately, whether it's revolting against the monarchy, whether it's God-given rights, or it's all those things, all of those are subordinate to the real fundamental question, which Hamilton laid out in Federalist Number 1. It's, could you have a society that it's reserved to the people of the United States to determine, can you have a society based on reflection and choice, or is mankind destined to live under various forms of despotism? And they believe that this country would ultimately answer that question because they studied the history of every republic in the history of mankind. They tried to draw lessons from all of those. And there was really only one thing that united all of those experiences throughout human history, and it was this. Every one of them had failed. And so they believed that you really had one more shot to figure out, can you have self-government? Can people control their own destiny? Can you have a society based on the idea that our rights are endowed by God, not granted to us by the government? Can you have limited government? Can you have the rule of law, not the rule of men? And they believed that ultimately this country would answer the question. But they also understood you could have the best constitution in the world. You could have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. They do not run on autopilot. And Benjamin Franklin pointed this out when he walked out of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, because they were meeting in secret. No one knew really what the hell was going on there. Try getting away with that now. There's no way you would be able to do it in an age of social media and all that stuff, but they met in secret. So Franklin was stopped on the street and said, Dr. Franklin, do you give us a republic or a monarchy? And his answer was a republic if you can keep it. I understood each generation would have to step up and defend freedom when it's at risk, and sometimes put on a uniform, risk your life, and even give that last full measure of devotion for service to this country. So the way I view what we've done in Florida is we are answering that question that, yes, self-government can work. Yes, people can thrive. Yes, we can respect God-given freedoms and even add additional protection. Yes, we can have the rule of law triumph over those. And so what we really are doing in this generation, 250 years later, we're carrying that torch of what George Washington called the sacred fire of liberty that was lit in Philadelphia in 1776, that was there in 1787 when they did the Constitution, that was at Gettysburg when Lincoln dedicated the battlefield cemetery, that was on the beaches of Normandy when our merry band of brothers stormed the shores and helped liberate the continent. It was the same flame that burned when President Reagan stood in front of the Berlin Wall and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. So this is the flame that we inherit, and we have to cultivate it, and we have to fight for it. But I'll tell you this, Ben told us, republic if you can keep it, in the state of Florida, because we've led boldly, courageously, and conservatively, we are doing our best to indeed keep our republic strong. Thank you, guys. God bless you. We appreciate it.